As the six-star beast tamer reached for the long, thick, and enigmatic lunar blade, a sudden burst of blinding light emanated from the weapon, stopping her hand dead in its tracks. The force of the impact knocked her hand away, and she stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock.
Move, bitch! Get out the way! Get out the way, bitch! Get out the way!
The invisible barrier that had blocked her way was a clear indication that she had failed to subdue the supreme weapon. She scratched her head in disbelief, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She had been told by the leader that she was the perfect person to capture the lunar blade. So what had gone wrong? As she struggled to come to a conclusion, a group of students appeared behind her, their eyes filled with disdain and anger. They were from the Soul Lunar sect, and they had come to exact revenge on the woman who had attacked 20 of their sect members. Just minutes earlier, the boy found more than 20 of his sect members heavily beaten up on the side of the road. Before the man lost consciousness, he warned the boy it was a woman, wearing a black cloak, the long black hair, and the pair of serpent-like eyes. With a cold, sneering grin, the woman looked at the group with her serpentine eyes. She was furious for being rejected by the lunar blade, and now she had a bunch of weaklings challenging her. "Who do you think you are?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Come on then, show me what you're made of." As the woman clenched her fist, a surge of power coursed through her body. With a sudden burst of light, 3 orbs appeared behind her, coming out of her. But? I don't know, it kinda looks like that, anyway, each one pulsing with otherworldly energy. The orbs hovered in the air, emanating an eerie glow that sent shivers down the spines of the Soul Lunar sect members. The woman smirked at their reactions, reveling in the fear and awe she had instilled in them. These were no ordinary beasts, they were the evil moon, the floating shadow, and the thunderous lunar, all high-ranked beasts. The sect members took a step back, their eyes widening in disbelief. How could a student summon 3 high-ranked beasts at once? It was unheard of, and yet, there she stood, commanding them with ease. "You asked for it," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "And now you shall feel the wrath of my beasts." With a flick of her wrist, she signaled her beasts to charge. And charge they did, their massive bodies crashing into the Soul Lunar sect members with a force that shook the very ground beneath them. Blood spattered the air as the beasts tore through their opponents with razor-sharp claws and teeth. They were hopelessly outmatched, their own beasts no match for woman's fearsome trio. In a matter of minutes, the carnage was over. The woman stood alone, her clothes pristine and her face unblemished. The only sounds that could be heard were the pained moans of the wounded and the sickening crunch of bones beneath her feet. She surveyed the scene with a cold, detached gaze, taking in the corpses of her opponents scattered across the ground like discarded toys. As the woman gazed upon the recumbent lunar blade, she couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement coursing through her veins. She spoke to the supreme weapon, hoping to earn its recognition and unlock its true power. But as the moments ticked by, the lunar blade remained silent, unmoved by her plea. Frustration etched across her face, she clenched her teeth and tightened her fists. Just then, a mocking voice shattered the stillness of the night. The voice from behind pierced the silence, calling her out as rubbish from the Black Moon clan. Enraged and confused, the woman turned around to face her tormentor. Her eyes burned with a fierce intensity as she beheld the Lunar King, striding towards her. She scanned the area, surprised to find that no one was protecting the Lunar King. As the Lunar King drew closer, she felt a surge of confidence, questioning if he truly thought he was invincible with just an emperor-ranked beast by his side. Su's lips curved upwards in a sly smile as he listened to the Blade Moon clan's boasts. They had fallen for the rumor spread by the sassy man. They actually believed that he had an emperor-ranked beast at his disposal when in reality, the rumors were all fake. He couldn't help but chuckle inwardly at their stupidity. They had set up the silent balance here, thinking it would prevent him from summoning a beast of that caliber. Su's voice was steady and composed as he spoke, knowing that his words held weight. He agreed with the woman and understood that relying solely on an emperor-ranked beast would not make him invincible, however, with or without the silent balance will not alter the end result. The woman's expression changed. She had no idea how the Lunar King had discovered the existence of the silent balance. Su locked eyes with her as if he was staring straight into her soul, as he gave her a warning. He advised her to break the teleportation stone and run for her life before his Double Moon clan seized the entire area. The woman was taken aback, her instincts told her to run, but her greed pushed her to take a chance. But as Su moved closer to the recumbent lunar blade, the woman's greed got the better of her. She couldn't resist the temptation of such a powerful weapon, and she ordered her beasts to attack Su. The air crackled with energy as the trio of beasts launched themselves at Su, each unleashing their most powerful abilities. But just as the attacks were about to strike him, Su was suddenly surrounded by a shimmering barrier, protecting him from harm. The woman's eyes widened in shock as she realized the vast power difference between herself and the Lunar King. Su's back was turned to the woman as he patted his chest, relieved that his moon reflection technique had successfully protected him from the onslaught. "Man, that was close," he muttered under his breath. He knew that his moon reflection couldn't attack back, but it made for a convincing bluff. The young woman was consumed by a tumultuous storm of embarrassment and jealousy, her emotions swirling within her like a tempestuous hurricane. She put her hands together tightly and clapped, blood dripping out of her sockets as she chanted a mysterious incantation. A circle began to form beneath her feet, and the ground beneath her began to shake violently. A giant black cloud formed in the sky, crackling with dark energy. As the dark clouds gathered overhead, and slithered through the darkness, a massive black serpent emerged, its scales glinting with an otherworldly sheen reflecting the faint moonlight. Its eyes, like orbs of blazing fire, seemed to pierce the very soul of those who gazed upon it. With a hiss that echoed through the skies, the serpent coiled and uncoiled its sinewy body, filling the air with a sense of dread and foreboding. The massive black serpent's fangs were long and sharp, glinting menacingly in the dim light. They were stained with the blood of their victims, a testament to the serpent's deadly nature. The woman had used the silent balance's skill, covering the sense of her supreme beast, rendering it undetectable, and avoiding waking up the recumbent lunar blade. The woman stood before Su, her chest puffed out with pride as she gazed upon her colossal beast. It was the largest and most powerful creature she had ever tamed, and she was eager to prove its might to the Lunar King. But as she looked into Su's eyes, she saw only coldness and detachment, as though the creature before him was nothing more than a mere insect. The woman's heart sank as she wondered if even a supreme-ranked beast could not earn the respect of this enigmatic ruler. As the woman pondered, Su recalled a post he had once read on the internet, a tactic to stare down a massive creature and appear unyielding, even in the face of certain doom. And so, he held his ground and stared back at the woman and her colossal serpent. This way, he can still die diligently. Frustration began to grow within the woman's beast, as it writhed and slithered around, sending tremors through the ground with each movement. The woman, feeling vexed and impatient, pointed a finger at Su, demanding to know why he had not yet summoned his own creature. The colossal serpent, sensing its master's irritation, let out an ear-splitting hiss and charged at Su, its massive jaws open wide as a wave of venom flew toward him. The air crackled with tension as Su stood unflinching in the face of the woman's attack. It was as if the very ground beneath his feet had transformed into a shimmering lake, and from its depths emerged a majestic creature. As the impact of the attack hit, it was like a thunderbolt striking the earth, shattering the ground and sending rubble flying in all directions. But Su remained unscathed, his cool demeanor never once faltering. Deep in his heart, however, he almost shit his pants. He knew that the lunar-typed beast could only exert half of its true power during the morning. And that his lake reflection had absorbed the brunt of the attack. If he had not been prepared, he would have been obliterated. As the dust settled, the woman lay sprawled on the ground, her eyes filled with a sense of despair. How could someone like Su even exist? It was a question that echoed through her mind as she struggled to catch her breath as she watches Su strode purposefully towards the recumbent lunar blade. She wondered if Su's invisible barrier could withstand the lunar blade strike that could knock down a star. As he reached out to grasp the hilt of the lunar blade, the woman's cold grin appeared. With a sudden motion, she disabled the silent balance, unleashing her supreme beast's full senses. In an instant, the lunar blade awakened, its ethereal glow filling the air with a pulsing, otherworldly light. A hand materialized from the misty air and reached towards the gleaming hilt of the blade. With a firm grip, the hand lifted the weapon off the ground, as if it were a featherweight. I will be honest with y'all, this is not how I imagined Guan Yu to look like. As the woman unleashed the full power of the lunar blade, the air crackled with energy, causing a fierce wind to blow through the valley. The ground beneath her feet trembled with each step she took, and her eyes glowed with an eerie light that seemed to pierce through the darkness. She lifted the blade high above her head, its metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. The air around the woman crackled with electricity, her body glowing with an otherworldly aura that seemed to pulsate like Super Saiyan. Su's heart raced as he felt the intensity of her energy, wondering if even he could withstand such an attack. Suddenly the barrier protecting him disappeared, and the lake reflection turned into her regular form, hiding behind Su. Su knew that the woman's power is over 9,000, and is to go even further beyond. As he turned his head, he was stunned to see the woman from the Black Moon clan being wrapped up in a bizarre shape that resembled a giant, coiled poop. The moment the woman jumped into the air and unsheathed the lunar blade, it was as if the heavens themselves had opened up to bestow upon her its divine power. The blade hummed with otherworldly energy, and as she swung it with the grace of a dancer, the air erupted in a cacophony of sound that echoed throughout the valley. Su's heart thundered in his chest as he realized the full extent of the woman's power. Her movements were graceful yet deadly, and the air crackled with an energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. Sweat beaded on Su's forehead as he struggled to come up with a plan of action, but he knew in his heart that there was no way he could defend against such an attack. With a desperate cry, Su called out to the heavens, his voice echoing through the valley like a prayer. "Heavenly Lunar, please come and save me," he screamed. Let us turn back the clock to just a few minutes ago when the Seoul Lunar Sect students had teleported outside of the zone. Their bodies were badly battered and bruised, their clothes torn and bloodied, as they protested against the academy. They claimed that a woman from the academy had attacked them, condemning the academy's actions and demanding justice. The elder of the Seoul Lunar Sect stood with her hand on her forehead, her eyes closed in deep thought. She instructed her students to calm down and then explained to them that the woman who had attacked them was not from the academy, but rather an elite member of the notorious Black Moon clan. The elder's gaze then shifted to the woman guarding the entrance, wondering why she seemed so calm. Did she not care about the safety of the Lunar King? Suddenly the woman's bell started ringing, jolting her out of her reverie. She opened her eyes and peered into the entrance, sensing that the recumbent lunar blade had been awakened. Without hesitation, she sprinted away from the entrance and demanded everyone to fall back. She could sense the powerful energy emanating from the lunar blade. But there was something else, another unfamiliar and incredibly powerful energy that seemed to be lurking in the shadows. Meanwhile, back in the zone, lake reflection shielded Su from the raining rubble, her body acting as a protective barrier against the onslaught of debris. Su couldn't help but wonder why the deer hadn't appeared yet. Could it be that the silent balance had insulated all sound, rendering the deer unable to hear his cries for help? He didn't have time to dwell on it, so he pulled out his phone and quickly sent a message to the deer for assistance. But as he clicked send, the woman launched her attack, descending closer toward Su with each passing moment. He could feel the heat emanating from her otherworldly aura, his heart racing as he tried to come up with a plan. With no other options left, he outstretched his hand and pointed towards the woman's bite. As the two energy collided, the impact caused a massive explosion. The shockwave spread throughout the valley, shattering rocks and uprooting trees, the force that blasted everything in its way. The cloaked woman slowly emerged from the bizarre shape that resembled a giant, coiled poop. She looked around, scanning the shattered ruins of the land for any trace of the Lunar King. The air was thick with the stench of destruction, and the ground trembled beneath her feet with each step she took. The lunar blade floated in the air, its metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. She couldn't sense any trace of the Lunar King, and her heart raced as she began to wonder if he had been reduced to nothing but dust. Lost in thought, the woman pondered her next move. She knew that her brilliant scheme had triggered the recumbent lunar blade, but what did that mean for the Lunar King? Roughly speaking, rounding everything off, it must have meant that she had defeated him. A surge of disbelief washed over her, and she covered her face in shock and excitement. The end. As the woman stood there, her body convulsing with laughter, she couldn't help but relish in the memory of the Lunar King's final moment. Even now, the thought of him staring at his phone as he faces his final moment sent her into fits of hysterics. Covering her face with her hands, she could feel the tears streaming down her cheeks, as she basked in the sweet satisfaction of her victory. She let out a triumphant shout, announcing her victory to the world. Suddenly, her laughter was interrupted by a blinding light emanating from the lunar blade. The woman's heart leaped in her chest as she watched in awe as the blade began to glow with otherworldly energy. This could only mean one thing: the blade had been awoken for a second time. But her jubilation was short-lived, as the blade's glow began to intensify, and the woman was engulfed in a blinding light. When the light subsided, the woman found herself standing amidst a pile of serpentine corpses, their writhing bodies reminding her of nothing more than a pile of shit. As she gazed into the distance, she could see the Lunar King emerging from the settling dust, his pristine clothing untouched by even a single speck of dirt. But it was the figure standing behind him that truly caught her attention, a towering figure, its majestic antlers reaching towards the sky. For a moment, the woman was filled with despair. What hope did she have against such a powerful foe? But then, she remembered the teleportation stone that she had been clutching tightly in her hand. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out of her pocket and prepared to make her escape. But before she could go, there was one last thing she needed to see: the Lunar King's beast. She knew it might be her only chance to witness this magnificent creature, and she wasn't about to let it pass her by. The woman standing before her was a breathtaking sight, with an ethereal beauty that was otherworldly. Her flowing hair was as white as newly fallen snow, cascading down her back like a river of silver. Her skin was as pale as the moon, and it was the magnificent antlers atop her head that truly took one's breath away. The antlers curled elegantly into the air, like a crown of ivory, enhancing her captivating presence. A gem of stunning beauty adorned her forehead, radiating a mesmerizing array of colors. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief as she took in the massive creature before her. The deer towered over her serpent, easily 5 times larger and more imposing. She had never encountered such a creature in all her years as a beast tamer, and a sense of hopelessness washed over her. Looking up at the Lunar King, she couldn't help but wonder how a one-star beast tamer could possibly harness the true power of such a magnificent beast. It all seemed like a cruel joke. Meanwhile, Sue was equally stunned by the little deer's transformation. From cute and cuddly to a breathtakingly beautiful creature, Sue couldn't help but wonder if the deer would one day be as alluring as the female phantom lurking behind them. But his thoughts were interrupted as the deer's voice broke through, urgently questioning if he had the plan to stop the recumbent lunar blade. The last thing they needed was to be attacked again, and Sue was left speechless by the creature's request. Just then, a bolt of lightning struck, and Sue's heart raced as he realized he had already come into contact with the deadly blade. With a sense of urgency, he frantically pulled out his lunar book and quickly scrolled to the page containing information on the recumbent lunar blade. He needed to act fast if they were going to make it out of this alive. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally stumbled upon a passage that described a mythical creature dating back to ancient times. The words leaped off the page, painting a vivid picture of the beast's relentless pursuit of her lost scabbard since the shattering of the moonlight. For millennia, the creature had scoured every corner of the land, tirelessly searching for the elusive scabbard that had been taken from her. Her search had become a never-ending cycle of sleep and wakefulness, and her determination had never wavered. But despite her tireless efforts, the scabbard remained out of her grasp. As time wore on, the creature grew weary of her endless quest and eventually withdrew from the world, refusing to communicate with any living beings. Under the description, the book also indicated that there's another piece of the weapon, the scabbard, which is currently locked. Sue's mind raced like a high-speed bullet train, considering every possible way to communicate with the enigmatic lunar blade. The gleaming blade was poised in an attack stance, ready for any threat that dared to approach her. Sue could feel the energy pulsing through the air, charged with an otherworldly force that made his hair stand on end. Suddenly, the lunar blade's eye snapped open, a fiery glow emanating from within. As the woman from the Black Moon clan fled back to her shelter, the lunar blade exchanged a meaningful glance with a deer, their energies colliding in midair like a symphony of light and sound. Sue knew that he had to act quickly before the opportunity slipped away. With steady steps, he approached the lunar blade, his hands outstretched in a gesture of peace. "Are you looking for your scabbard, Frosty of the waxing moon?" Su asked, his voice firm and commanding. "Bear with me here, this is impossible to properly translate, for future reference, we will be calling it just by the scabbard." Back to the story, the lunar blade was clearly struck by Su's words, her eye widening with curiosity. Su took a deep breath and swore on behalf of his title as the Lunar King, promising to bring the scabbard to her within 3 years. But there was a catch. In exchange, she had to agree to one condition. The lunar blade knew exactly what Su was thinking. Slowly, she closed her eyes, allowing Su's hand to penetrate the protective barrier around her. Lake Reflection turned into a tranquil lake and began to roil and churn, the once calm waters transforming into a swirling vortex of power. The lunar blade, now circling within the miniature tornado, seemed to be bowing to Su, acknowledging him as her new master. With a sudden gust of wind, the lunar blade descended and plunged itself into Su's waiting body. Su felt a rush of energy course through him, his body vibrating with newfound strength. The deer, now looking at Su, knew that this news will surely cause a wave throughout the realm. The woman, who had been observing from a distance, was stunned. She knew that tens of thousands of beast tamers throughout history had tried and failed to capture the recumbent lunar blade. It was said that the blade could not be destroyed, but the moment she become one's contract beast, thus her life will be held tightly with its owner, and the only way to make a contract with it was to prove oneself as an unbeatable warrior. The woman knew with unwavering conviction that she had to transmit this message back to the nefarious Black Moon clan, even if it meant sacrificing her own life to do so. She had no choice but to take drastic measures. With a fierce determination blazing in her eyes, she summoned her colossal serpent with a resounding roar and charged recklessly towards Su, fueled by desperation and a fierce desire to complete her mission. Su turned around and locked eyes with the woman, instantly realizing that she had seen too much. Without hesitation, the deer unleashed a devastating blast of purple energy from her mouth, which surged forward and obliterated everything in its path, including the colossal serpent and even an entire mountain. The impact was so forceful that the shock waves rippled through the air and the ground, causing everything to tremble in its wake. As the dust settled, the woman coughed up blood, realizing that she had finally pieced everything together and uncovered the true identity of the white flower deer. She knew that she had to flee immediately, so she reached into her pocket and retrieved a teleportation stone. However, she needed to create a diversion to distract Su and the white flower deer. Summoning her 3 high-ranking beasts, she sent them charging towards Su and the white flower deer. The woman's heart pounded furiously in her chest as she desperately pressed down on the teleportation stone, hoping to shatter it without drawing any unwanted attention. But just as she thought she had succeeded, a sudden gust of wind whipped past her outstretched fingers, snatching the stone from her grasp in the blink of an eye. To her horror, she saw the wet noodle-level flicker butterfly fluttering away from her, its tiny wings beating furiously as it carried the stone back to Su. The woman's heart sank as she realized the depth of her folly, realizing too late that she had underestimated the Lunar King and his cunning tactics. Su's eyes gleamed with malevolent delight as he looked upon the captured teleportation stone, smirking as he remarked, "Who would ever pay attention to a flicker butterfly in a battle between supreme-ranked beasts, right?" The woman knew that she had made a grave mistake in underestimating her opponent, and she could feel the weight of her impending doom pressing down on her. She regretted her foolishness, but still thought it was an honor to fight the Lunar King. With a sudden burst of blinding light, the woman closed her eyes tightly, bracing herself for the inevitable. The deafening silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps echoing through the air. Every head turned towards the entrance, their breaths held in anticipation. Suddenly, a figure appeared, slowly emerging from the darkness like a menacing shadow. It was Su, his imposing presence commanding attention as he strode toward the gathered crowd. With a piercing gaze, he surveyed the faces before him, his eyes locking onto each and every one of them. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the anticipation was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Su, waiting for him to speak. And then, with a voice that carried the weight of a conqueror, he began to speak. His words rang out like a bell, his tone one of finality and power. "The battle is over," he announced, his voice booming through the air. "And as the rightful owner of the recumbent lunar blade, I shall take it under my custody from this day forward."